It begins innocently, as it always does. When Daniel first met Claire, she was the very definition of charm wrapped in silk. Her smile had the kind of warmth that made strangers trust her within seconds, and her voice carried that soft cadence that could calm a storm. He thought she was rare, a woman who truly saw him, who laughed at his jokes, who remembered the little details he casually dropped, like his favorite childhood candy or the name of his old dog. But here is the warning most people miss. When something feels too perfectly tailored to your soul, you must pause. Narcissists, especially the covert ones, are masters of mirrors. They reflect back the pieces of yourself that you most want to be loved for. And Claire, though she never showed her hand, was a master player of this deadly game. At first, Daniel's friends adored her. They said things like, "She's so sweet," and "Wow, she really balances you." And she did. Or at least, she made it look that way. She spoke softly in groups, never trying to outshine him, always letting him feel like the stronger one. But behind closed doors, when no one was watching, her eyes carried something darker. A shadow. A quiet calculation. Her manipulation didn't roar like thunder. It whispered like smoke. She would drop subtle remarks, cloaked in concern. "Are you sure your boss really values you, Daniel? I mean, I just noticed she praises others more than you. I just don't want you to get blindsided." Or, "I can't believe your friend Mark didn't invite you first. That must mean something." At first, Daniel thought she was being protective. He mistook her seeds of doubt as acts of love. But those seeds grew roots. Slowly, his trust in others began to wither, while his dependence on her deepened. He didn't see the trap being laid. The most dangerous hidden narcissism behavior in women isn't rage, or even the obvious lies. It is subtle isolation through emotional sabotage. She didn't tell him to stop seeing his friends. She made him want to stop. She didn't demand that he rely on her. She made him choose her, again and again, until she became the sun, and everything else faded into shadow. Daniel's world began shrinking, almost invisibly, but the smaller it became, the larger her presence grew. And by the time he noticed the pattern, it was too late. He had already traded freedom for what he thought was love. This is how the mask works. And this is only the beginning. Daniel didn't notice the cracks at first. How could he? Claire had built a fortress of subtlety around him, a carefully crafted illusion where he felt both chosen and dependent. He mistook her whispers for wisdom, her shadows for protection. But the danger of covert narcissism is not in the obvious blow. It is in the erosion, the slow chipping away of your identity until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Claire's control was disguised as care. She never screamed, never cursed, never gave him the ammunition to point a finger and say, "This is abuse." Instead, she used the softest weapons, doubt, guilt, and a smile that never seemed to fade. It started with his friendships. When Daniel told Claire he was meeting Mark for dinner, she tilted her head and sighed. "Of course, love. I just hope Mark doesn't make you feel small again. Remember last time?" The truth was, Mark had done no such thing. But Claire's phrasing made Daniel reconsider. Maybe he had misread his own experience. Maybe she saw something he didn't. So he cancelled. Then came work. He had been up for a promotion, and Claire was the first to remind him how unlikely it was. "You're amazing, Daniel. But you know how companies play favorites. I just don't want to see you get hurt." Her voice was syrup-sweet, but her words wrapped around his confidence like chains. By the time the promotion was denied, Daniel believed it had been inevitable, just as Claire had predicted. She had him convinced she was the only one who truly understood him. Here's the terrifying part. Covert narcissists don't just manipulate what you think, they manipulate how you think. They rewire the trust in your own perception. Once that inner compass is broken, you depend on theirs. And Claire? She made sure her compass always pointed back to her. The isolation deepened. Friends grew distant. Daniel found himself explaining Claire's quirks, defending her silences, justifying her sudden mood swings. His parents noticed the change. He spoke less, laughed less, seemed drained. But whenever they raised concern, he became defensive. After all, Claire had already planted the thought, "Your parents don't really respect your choices, do they? They always undermine you." By now, her web had fully wrapped around him. Every criticism from the outside world sounded like proof of what she had been warning him about, and every ounce of comfort seemed to come only from her. But Claire's game wasn't about companionship. It was about control, and control, once secured, always demands escalation. The mask of sweetness would not last forever. Because the most dangerous hidden narcissism behavior isn't just the isolation, it's the reveal, the moment when the mask finally slips and the prey realizes the trap. By then, escape feels impossible. And Daniel was about to see the shadow behind the smile. It happened on an ordinary evening. Daniel came home later than usual, tired but relieved after a long day at work. He'd stayed back to help a colleague wrap up a project, something he had done countless times before. But that night, the air in the apartment felt different, heavier. Claire was waiting, her usual soft smile absent. "Where were you?" she asked. The words were simple, but her tone was sharp enough to cut glass. Daniel blinked. "I told you. I had to help Lisa with the client files." "Lisa." Claire repeated the name like it was venom. She turned away, her shoulders stiff. "It's always Lisa, isn't it?" For the first time, the warmth he had always associated with her wasn't there. Instead, her voice carried accusation, suspicion, a quiet rage that seemed disproportionate. Daniel tried to reassure her, but Claire didn't want reassurance. She wanted control. That night, she wept, then accused, then withdrew into a chilling silence. He apologized again and again, even though he had done nothing wrong. This was the crack in the mask. The following weeks revealed more. Her once subtle remarks sharpened into barbs. She mocked his ambitions under the guise of teasing. She grew cold and distant when he disagreed, rewarding him only when he fell in line. And every time he questioned the change, she twisted reality back onto him. "You're imagining things, Daniel. You're too sensitive. If you really loved me, you'd trust me." Gaslighting became her most powerful weapon. Each denial of his reality left him doubting his own memory, his own judgment. He stopped questioning, because questioning only led to conflict, and conflict always ended with him apologizing. This is the most dangerous stage of hidden narcissism. Once the prey is isolated and emotionally dependent, the narcissist shifts from seduction to domination. The sweetness becomes conditional, a prize to be earned. And the punishment? Emotional starvation. Daniel lived for scraps of affection. A smile after days of coldness felt like a gift. A soft word after hours of silence felt like forgiveness. He didn't realize it, but she had trained him, like a puppeteer rewarding a marionette with strings pulled just tightly enough. But the cracks in the mask grew wider. Claire's need for control was insatiable. She began demanding to know where he was at all times. She made subtle digs at his appearance, his choices, his very sense of self. The man who once laughed loudly, dreamed boldly, and stood proudly now walked on eggshells, measuring every word, every move. And yet, something inside him stirred. A faint memory of who he used to be, of the freedom he once had. His parents' worried voices echoed in his mind. His friend's absence stung like a wound he couldn't ignore. The spell was strong, but not unbreakable. The question was, Could Daniel recognize the truth before Claire tightened the leash beyond repair? Because covert narcissists have a final weapon, one more devastating than the rest. And Daniel was about to face it. By the time Daniel realized how much of himself he had lost, it was already late. His friendships were gone, his family kept their distance, and his confidence had withered to the size of a seed. Claire had become the center of his world, and she knew it. That was when she revealed her most dangerous weapon. It wasn't her charm. It wasn't the gaslighting. It wasn't even the isolation. It was withholding love. For weeks, Claire withdrew into a calculated coldness. She gave him silence where there had once been laughter, indifference where there had once been warmth. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply vanished emotionally, leaving Daniel desperate to win her back. He begged. He tried harder. He cooked her favorite meals, showered her with compliments, adjusted himself to her every mood, but the more he gave, the less she responded. This was the cruelest trick of all, to make him chase the very affection she had dangled so easily at the start. Every now and then, she tossed him a crumb, a fleeting smile, a gentle touch, a whispered, "I love you," just enough to keep the hope alive, and then she pulled it away again. Like a gambler waiting for the next jackpot, Daniel stayed hooked on the possibility that the woman he fell in love with would reappear. But she never did. One night, after weeks of this torment, Daniel stood in front of the mirror. His reflection startled him. His eyes looked hollow, his shoulders slumped. He barely recognized the man staring back. And in that silence, a realization struck him. The Claire he loved had never existed. She was an illusion, a mask designed to lure him in, to strip him of himself, to feed her need for control. The woman behind the mask was never his savior. She was his captor. It was then that the warning became clear. The most dangerous hidden narcissism behavior in women is not the love bombing, not the gaslighting, not even the subtle isolation. It is the erasure of self they engineer in their partners. They don't just want your love, they want your identity, piece by piece, until nothing remains but dependence. Daniel made a choice that night. He packed a bag, left the apartment, and turned off his phone. The road to healing would be long, filled with doubts, relapses, and nights where he missed the illusion more than he missed the truth. But the first step had been taken. He had walked away. And as he drove into the dark, one warning echoed in his mind. A warning he wished he had seen earlier, one he now wanted to shout to anyone who would listen. Beware the mask of the covert narcissist. Beware the charm that feels too perfect. Beware the love that slowly teaches you to stop loving yourself. Because the most dangerous behavior isn't what they do to you, it's what they convince you to do to yourself. And that, Daniel knew, was the most silent and deadly theft of all.